Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg. I'm really pleased for our guest today. Janie Simms Hipp is the president and CEO of Native Agricultural Financial Services, an organization that focuses on meeting the capital access needs of Native farmers, ranchers, fishers, and forest land operators and their rural communities. Prior to her role at NAFS, she served as the general counsel of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where she was the fourth woman and the fourth Native American person to hold the position. Really honored to have you. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Thank you so much, Janie.
It's good to see you too, Dani.
I'm hoping you can share with our listeners and our viewers what the Native Agricultural Financial Services organization does for your what it does for Native folks.
Okay. So we're a financial services firm. First and foremost, we were created to focus on lending to Native producers, and you went through a little bit of um, who we define as Native producers, and that can be farmers, it can be fishers, it can be food processors, it can be
Mhm.
timber folks who do timber work, ranchers, anyone really within the broadest definition of agriculture that you can possibly think of. Um, and that can, as you know, in Indian country, take on many uh, pictures, and
Right.
that's what it should be. It should be varied and unique to the people in the place. So, our role and our mission is to provide capital. And capital has always been extremely difficult to come by in agriculture. And
Right.
it's not just for us, it's for a lot of other people too, because agriculture itself, anytime that you're actually doing agriculture, and by that I mean any activity that results in food that enters
Mhm.
into the food supply chain to feed people, you got basically one first question, which is, am I doing this just for my family, or am I doing
Right.
it to result in an income stream for my family? Who am I selling it to? Where is it going? And all of
Right.
those, this vast array of questions that kind of come to the fore. We're neutral about that. We are absolutely a-okay with you doing food and food production for your family, for your
Sure.
community, for your tribe, for your region, for the country, and for the world. We are neutral about that. All we know is that capital is essential to that activity.
Right.
And it's got to come from somewhere. And it's not unique to just Native people, it's really all farmers. And by
Sure.
farmers, I just really mean the whole picture that I just described.
Of
If
course.
you don't have capital, you can't get it done.
Right. You can't get it done. But I think native producers in so many ways face different challenges than someone who looks like me, right?
Yes and no, Dani. I'll tell you some of it. Yes, yes, you're right. But some of it we're very similar to other people, which
Mm.
means the more remote you are in
Hmm.
this country and elsewhere around the world, the harder it is to find capital.
Right.
Remoteness also means not only am I just out there by myself or with a handful of other people, in all likelihood, there's not a bank and there's not
Right. Right.
capital resources that follow me, into remote locations. So,
Right.
many Native people around the country have struggled with that over the years because a lot of our communities can be very rural and very remote. And so that is an issue that is not unique to us, but we do have some
Sure.
unique issues that do apply to us, mainly based on our political status and and in many cases, the land tenure status of the lands upon which we actually live and are in community and utilize for agriculture production. So
Right.
it's a combination of factors that can make access to capital more difficult.
Can you talk about sort of the unique challenges of land tenure on tribal land?
Well, do you have about 10 more hours? We could go into this. And I say that trying to laugh about it because it's so complicated. Dani, you know this, you've been at this a really long time. Uh, those land tenure issues can be quite difficult in what we call Indian country, which is a federal
Right.
term. It's been recognized in use. A lot of folks now refer to it as native country. I'm neutral about that. All I know
Sure.
is that in many locations, we do have land tenure that is unique. And so a lot of people that aren't familiar with our communities and our political status and who we are as Native people, and I should say I am Chickasaw, I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, um, don't quite understand that when you might go out and buy a piece of land, right, or have it inherited to you from your
Hmm.
family,
Hmm.
and you use it for farming and ranching, you're likely dealing with what we call in the law as fee land. Uh,
Hmm.
but that quite often is not the case when you are within reservation boundaries or within the tribal jurisdictional boundaries, because those
Sure.
are different legal status land bases. And within those parameters or perimeters, you can see trust land that's held in trust by the federal government. You can see restricted land. You can see fee land. You
Hmm.
can see all sorts of other allotted lands, um, multiple types of land tenure. And it's also very complicated because, particularly when you're doing land based agricultural activities like
Sure.
farming or ranching, it's not unusual because of the checkerboarded land tenure circumstances of many locations around Indian country. It's not unusual for a rancher to literally uh, do his ranching or her ranching literally on multiple land tenure
Right.
within the confines of their own operation. So it can be quite complicated. The federal government has a role to play, particularly when you're dealing with land base that is not fee. Uh,
Hmm.
it's just we have challenges that are unique to us because of the land tenure situations.
Sure, absolutely. You also mentioned the political status of Native folks. Can you dig a little bit more into that? What that means for
Well,
those of us who aren't living that experience?
um, shall I start at the beginning? uh, uh, my ancestors, many of my friends' ancestors who are Native people, um, our ancestors were here long before anyone else came. And there's and it's hard for me to answer that question because I try
Sure.
to answer it as a Chickasaw woman, but
Yeah.
I also need to answer it as a lawyer.
Sure. Sure.
And trying to do both succinctly is tricky.
I made it hard for you. I apologize.
It's okay. It's not unusual. We have a political status that is recognized and has been recognized by the courts, by Congress, by federal and state law since before this country became the United States.
Right.
And so, uh, a lot of folks, particularly now, are quite focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, but they leave out political status.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somehow Native people get lumped into, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, and
Sure.
accessibility. And we can be in all of those places, but we also, and primarily in my mind, have a political status that has been recognized by the US Supreme Court, by treaties entered into by this country. And treaties are the supreme law of the land. They are
Right.
more binding even than Congress and its action. So it's just it's a it's a journey. I'll just say it
Yeah.
that way, Dani. We
Yeah.
could spend hours and hours and hours going into that, but when I think about agriculture and food within Indian country, and I think about the long ancestral traditions that we have as Native people in that whole food space, which is the whole essence of food tank, right?
Sure.
Then that experience has to take into consideration our political status,
Right, right,
our land tenure issues that are unique to us. But it also has to also include the reality that we do this not separate from anyone else. We
right,
face the same capital access problems. We face the same food supply chain problems. When
right.
things fall apart, we are affected just as, and sometimes in even more profound ways than other folks who are trying to do agriculture.
Sure.
We've been doing agriculture in this country for tens of thousands of years.
Right, right,
And quite frankly, sometimes we're not even remembered in that
right,
context. And
right.
so it's quite exciting to do this work. And to at least, I'm thinking about it now as CEO of Native Ag Financial Services. My job and my mission with this organization is to do everything I can during my time, right,
Mhm, mhm.
to try to do forward momentum around
Sure.
capital access for native agriculture. Um, yeah, there's a lot of other issues going on in the world,
Right.
and I'm going to be involved and have something to think about all of those and do and say about them.
Yeah.
But I've just been at ag for a really long time, 40 some odd years. Ugh.
I know. Congratulations. It's
When did
not
that
enough.
happen? And and it's just an honor and a privilege to actually be working on these important issues at this moment.
It
So,
is. Yeah.
yes, we can go on and on about land tenure and political status and all of that. And it's really important for your listeners to understand that that is
Sure.
a whole separate rabbit hole that we can and should go
Yeah.
down, because we all need to learn more about each other.
Right.
Um, but just suffice it to say that I look at that world with an overlay of ag and food. And I
Yeah, of
realize
course.
how important it is for us to focus on those issues, but within the context of food.
Absolutely, absolutely. So going back to your work, I wonder how you help native producers both get the access to credit that they need and then develop sort of reasonable repayment plans for their loans, because I think that's often, such a challenge for all of us who take out loans. But because of the ruralness, the remoteness, I think it's especially harder for native farmers.
It is, and um, it is, but it's also becoming extremely hard for all farmers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess, Dani, I'm just going to be painfully obvious and
Mm-hmm.
honest. I
Mm-hmm.
turned
Please.
70 this year.
Oh, congratulations. You look great.
Well, I'm trying to keep it together.
You look
Uh,
wonderful.
but my grandfather had a tractor dealership, and it
Hmm.
had a dirt floor, and he just sold used and new tractors and worked on them. And we lived in a tiny little community in the southeast part of Oklahoma, and he serviced, a 4 state area.
Wow.
And we had a great existence of just up to my eyeballs with farmers and ranchers all the
Hmm.
long day.
Hmm.
Um, but I remember a time when that hailstorm came, and the farmers would call my grandfather and say, I'm going to have a hard time making that payment this
Right,
time.
right, right,
And he would give them a pass because he could turn to his banker and they would give him a pass,
right,
because everybody knew that agriculture was unique, and agriculture was not like having you know, a shoe store. Uh,
right.
your
Right.
inventory is out
Relationships.
exposed to the hail
Sure,
every single
sure.
day. And we we also came from a community and at a time where everybody knew how hard it was to eat. We were
Right,
My grandparents were depression kids.
right,
So we, meaning all of us, have taken for granted that capital might be there.
right.
And every single time we have, a financial upheaval or tariffs or something happens in the marketplace or COVID,
Hmm.
I mean, just
Hmm.
kind of choose your crisis, right?
Right, right.
Every time we have that, the financial sector does what it should do. It literally goes,
Right.
it takes a deep breath and tries to stabilize. And it feels to me, and I'm 70 almost, it feels to me like we've had enough of those in my lifetime, that every time those blips happen on the screen, it becomes
Hmm.
harder and harder and harder to get a loan, to have terms that are something you can live with. To,
Right.
and I call it sometimes, Dani, when I'm talking publicly, um, uh, I call it, we used to have patience and grace for oops.
Right.
Oh
Right.
my gosh, I didn't see that coming. Or,
Sure.
you know, nature came and I don't have a crop anymore. And we
Right.
just don't do that anymore
Right.
in ag. And I'm an advocate. Um, Zach Ducheneau, who I love dearly, he talks about this all the time. And other people I know, both within the financial sector and outside of that in agriculture, are all talking about it. We
Yeah.
actually need to take a pause
Hmm.
and really come to terms with the reality that when we're talking about food, we need to actually have a financial sector and a system that allows for people to have mistakes, right,
Right.
that were not of
Right.
their making, and um, and gives them a moment to redo their business plan, right?
Right. Right.
Recalibrate, uh, go, wow, I lost that market overnight. I'm going
Right.
to have to go find another one, and gives that patience. And we just
Yeah.
don't do that anymore. And
Yeah,
honestly, we
absolutely.
should.
Yeah, we do need more patience. And you're right that food and farming is so different than other businesses that, every business at some point is going to be affected by the climate crisis, but it's especially, you can feel it, you can taste it in food and farming. And you mentioned the ability to make mistakes, right? Or, mistakes happen because of weather or whatever, but also the ability, I think, to experiment.
Yes,
Farmers need that, food producers need that ability to experiment as well. And sometimes it doesn't work out. But
right.
you
And
should have,
exactly. And I've spent so many decades in agriculture, and I've had the honor to be involved at the university level, in the land grant system, at the government level, state and federal. I've just swum around in so many
right,
areas of agriculture for so long.
right,
Uh, we have forgotten that producers and fishers and people who work in timber, all of those folks who work on and around our waters and our lands,
right,
are incredible scientists.
right, right,
And you know they literally spend every day watching and adjusting and experimenting, because
right,
they
right.
have to. And in many cases, I think we in this country and elsewhere around the world, we take all of that for granted. And we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
really honor and lift that up. And I personally don't care what you grow, where you grow it. I'm just pro farmer, rancher, fisher. I don't care.
right,
We need food, people, and my job on this planet is to support them. But
that's
I also recognize um, how incredibly they are, and how complex they are. No matter
right,
what they're raising or growing, they literally have to react in real time to things that a lot of us don't have to.
right. And the knowledge and the skill set to be able to do that is
Right.
incredible. Can you talk a little bit about what it looks like for a fisher or a forager or a farmer or a rancher to get capital through you all, and what are some of the things that they do with it?
Oh, well, um, I'm going to speak about it more generally, because I don't want it to say that we're unique, because
Hmm. Hmm.
shouldn't be unique. This is the way it should always be.
Sure, sure.
If I'm gonna do capital, if I'm gonna go in and want to get a loan to do, you know, to either buy a new piece of equipment, or buy a piece of land, or pay somebody who's working with me, it's operating or equipment loans or just whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I need to walk in with a business plan.
Sure.
I, I need to know my numbers inside
Yeah.
and out. And I need to understand that what I'm doing may be the salt of the earth and the most wonderful thing in the world to do, but it involves money. And
Right.
I
Right.
need to be able to show somebody my numbers and really have a lot of technical support that I can access that can
Mm-hmm.
literally help me refine those skills over time. And I will tell you that native producers need that just as much as anybody else.
Right. Right. Right.
Right. And to be able to actually kind of keep on top of that, to keep really good records. I have yet to meet any producer. I don't care who you are, what you're growing, where you are, it
Right.
doesn't matter.
Right.
You got to have good records.
Yeah.
And if you don't
Yeah.
have good records of what's happening on your land, it's really, or within your fishery or whatever, you is unless you've got a photographic memory,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
most of us don't have, it's going to be really hard to do that long-term analysis, and you just need to have that discipline, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So coming in with a strong sense of what is your goal here,
Right.
what is it that you want to do, and to be able to explain that well to somebody and show it in the numbers. And if you're going into some sort of commercial marketplace, I don't care where it is, could be to your local farmers market, or it could be, an export market.
Right.
It doesn't matter. But you've got to actually think about, how do you get there? How do you get your product from your place to that location?
Right.
And what are the costs of getting it there? And what happens if that market dries up for some? Do you
Right.
have a backup plan? All of those things are what anyone who's loaning you money is going to be interested in knowing.
Yeah.
And here's my problem. Quite often, folks in the financial sector, and I've seen it in other realms also, just in government activities and elsewhere, we like to make it easy on ourselves. We like to actually make it formulaic, and I'll just check all these boxes and it
Right.
comes out
Right.
to X, then you get it. And that's just being kind of being a machine about it.
Right. Right.
Right
Right. Right.
now, yeah, you can do that kind of lending if you want to, but you're not really getting to know the people, the place, the thing they're trying to do, their goals and aspirations. And you
Right.
sometimes, when you're a lender, you can see something on paper that looks like it might be kind of marginal, but you can read that person and they're going to pay that back.
Right. Right.
They're a good risk.
Right.
And sometimes people can look amazing on paper and you're going, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much to lending that we like to try to make easy and quick, and check 5 boxes online and I've got a loan coming out the other end. That's not really doing lending.
Yeah.
Opinion.
It sounds to me like the kind of lending you do is building relationships,
Yes.
right? It's building those relationships that build resilience later on for communities, for our food and agriculture systems, et cetera,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And that's what I was going back to what I was saying earlier, Dani. We've got to get to a place in this country, and I would argue elsewhere, where if you care enough to spend your life feeding other people,
Right.
then we're
Come
going to
on.
honor that, and we're going to hang with you because, oh, by golly, we actually need you.
Right.
There are
Right.
so many people on this planet and all around the globe who literally cannot feed themselves. They need a group of people amongst us who that is their purpose in life.
Right. Right.
That's what makes them tick. And we need to actually honor that, because if we don't have food, we got a bigger problem. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it's so simple, and it's, but
Sure.
yet so complex.
Absolutely. But, that reminder of honoring and respecting our food producers, whether they're, native folks or, again, people who look like me, they should be honored and respected. And I think we've forgotten that in this country and, around the world. We don't respect farmers.
Exactly. And honestly, Dani, you can see it in our laws.
Right, right.
I'm a lawyer. I've been doing agricultural law since the 80s, and I've taught in law schools. I am just a total nerd when it comes to ag law. I can't help myself. But we really have not done a meaningful revisit of our agricultural legal frameworks in this
Sure.
country since the 40s.
Yeah.
We're coming up
Crazy.
on 100 years of basically, yeah, we have a farm bill every 5 years or so, unless it's late. And yeah, we have all these programs. We have legacy programs at USDA, where I was general counsel, that date all the way back to the 40s.
Right, right.
I mean, that's are we saying that things are just so stable that we don't have to look at things every so often? I mean,
Right,
I don't
right.
understand why we as a country are not more focused on this. And
Yeah.
a lot of people think, well, it's the farm bill, and if they don't do it, then it's not getting done, and it's so comprehensive. No, the farm bill is an appropriations vehicle.
Right, right, right.
Most agricultural laws in this country are at the state and local level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those have not been touched for since before the 40s.
Wow.
And so it's I honestly, y'all, it's time.
Sure,
It's
sure.
time for, and it's not just a climate issue, it's a finance issue. It's literally the
Hmm.
world has changed. And if we're going to be prepared for the next 100 years,
Yeah,
then we need to actually be willing as human beings to actually look at what it is we've surrounded ourselves with
right.
in this context. And a lot of people go, well, we just need to have the be all and end all farm bill, but that's only a portion of the actual construct. Most property and contracts laws are written at the state level.
Right,
So unless you're
right,
looking at those two, then you're kind of off base.
right. What would it take, Janie, to get those laws updated or revamped or new laws?
uh, Human will.
Yeah,
I hate to
yeah,
say it, but that's really it. I mean, my fear is that we're going to keep ignoring all of this to our detriment, and we will hit a bigger wall than COVID ever was,
yeah, yeah,
and we will have a crisis on our hands, and we will have to do it then. And
yeah,
if you think about it, Dani, all the way back to World War I, to the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, all of those time periods. And then if you actually look at the laws that were put in place coming out of that,
right,
that
right,
was coming out of one crisis after another.
right.
Do we really have to be that stupid
Yeah, yeah,
that we that we wait for 4 or 5 or 6 crises before
right.
we decide to honor and to come up underneath and support our producers and really
Yeah,
think clearly about what our grandchildren need? I'm getting
right.
ready to have my first grandchild.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
excited and
Yeah.
going good because I'm 70. Get with it.
You're like about time.
It's about time. But now I think about it even more.
Sure.
I mean, this is going to require people at the local level, at the state level, at the national level to really just stop all of this arguing and pointing fingers at each other and sit down
Yeah.
and figure out how we're going to plan for our food.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody's got to be at the table.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can't just be we're only talking amongst our sustainable selves. We need to
Right.
talk to the conventional selves. We need to talk to the commodity people.
Yep.
Everybody's got a role to play here, and we have to stop throwing food at each other and actually sit down at the table
Right.
and figure out how we're going to do this together. And that's what people did 100 years ago, because
Yeah.
there were soup lines everywhere and farmers couldn't put a seed in the ground. So
Right, right.
let's not get that bad,
Yeah, let's not
shall
wait
we?
for more crises to happen.
Oh,
I want to go back to the lack of respect for farmers, and there's been such huge changes in the last several months, especially at the United States Department of Agriculture and other agencies. I'm wondering, how the cuts to federal funding for many farm programs are affecting, the kind of work that you do and the folks that you're working with.
well, you know, how do I say this? Cuts and changes happen all the time. And then all of a sudden you don't have cuts and you have growth. And
Right.
it's hard for me to it's hard for me not I agriculture is bipartisan. You
Right. It
cannot
has to be.
live in the agriculture policy space without being truly bipartisan. And as much as we try to get in our camps and fight with each other, it at the end of the day, I've seen it for too many decades. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, we usually get around the table and try to work it out because agriculture has to be bipartisan. Um, and I have been around long enough that I've seen growth in programs and I've seen a
Hmm.
pulling back.
Okay.
But I can tell you straight up, I deeply respect USDA, but it's breaking my heart to see all these people leave.
Right. Right. All
And
that
a lot of
intellectual.
people just
Yeah.
don't understand what goes on at USDA because it's literally in every single county in the United States and 70 embassies around the globe.
Right.
We even
Right.
have agriculture in the space station, for God's sake. So it's everywhere, but it's also so everywhere that people don't realize that it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you go in and you just cut, what you do is you may cut the wrong way. And you
Right.
may, I mean, I'll never forget on my way out when I was most recently there, you could see that we were getting ready and some of it was right on our doorstep of facing 4 or 5 different animal and poultry diseases all happening at the same time. You
Right.
should not cut people who actually monitor that.
Right. Right.
That's not a
Make
good plan.
right. Makes no sense.
No, no, but at the same time, you know, USDA is not unlike other departments also, Dani, because we have waves of people who come and feel the call of public service and they go in
Right.
and I don't care which administration they come in
Sure.
before
Sure.
through. Why do I care? But they come in waves. And so when I was last there, you could see that there was a wave of folks that were going to be leaving who were about my age. And they had
Mm-hmm.
been there
Mm-hmm.
like 30 years. They'd given their life
Sure.
to public service.
Right.
But if you're cutting all over the place at a time when you've got diseases coming at you, right?
Right.
Or, you know, being drenched with water over here and on fire over there, just
Right.
you got to be so careful when you're in that kind of space trying to be efficient and effective. You need to
Right.
be almost surgical, in my
Yeah.
opinion, right?
Right.
Because you got it. A lot of people also, I think, don't really understand how USDA is wired up
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because years ago somebody came to me and they said, well, we think you should just send over this program in this agency and let this other department run it. And I was going, well, you might think that's a good idea, but we at USDA would have to send over 3 other agencies
Right.
to run it because everything is like knitted together because so
Right.
many of those authorities are so old and have just been built and created over time.
Right.
And for the life of me, I don't understand some of the cuts that are being made. I don't
Yeah.
understand why we can't take our time, and in the interest of efficiency and effectiveness, let's be surgical and smart about it.
Right.
I'm a proponent of going in with scalpels as opposed to sledgehammers.
And
And
chainsaws. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you've got to be careful when you're dealing with public health and when you're dealing with our food supply, which is a matter of national security.
Absolutely.
And the other thing too, Dani, if you got it, and you have to think about it this way too. If you look at the data about who our farmers are,
Mhm.
80% ish of our farmers in the United States are small to mid-sized family farms.
Right.
There's veterans, women's, Black farmer, Native folks, Hmong farmers, beginning farmers, white farmers.
Right.
There's 80% of us are small to mid-sized family farms who, for
Yeah.
the most part, are diverse operations with livestock and some specialty crops and maybe some fisheries thrown in. And we're when you don't do surgery, then you place at risk 80% of those farmers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we're not careful, we're going to either be chasing them away,
Right.
or we're not going to pay attention when they leave. And then all of a sudden you look up and the land is gone,
Right.
or the people are gone who can work the land, or the rural community dies, and it's just not a good picture. And I just
Right.
feel like there's a better way to do it. And I love USDA. I love ag law. I love our nation's farmers and fishers. Of course, I'm going to be partial to Native people, but that doesn't mean that that's as far as my heart goes, because
Sure. Sure.
I'm about all the picture. But we just need USDA to slow down and to
Yeah.
literally be. This is an important moment in the intergenerational transfer of farms and making sure that we don't lose these 20 somethings, right?
Right. Right.
Who are passionate about food and want to
So
come in.
passionate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's just a lot at stake. And I think I would prefer if things had gone slower and been more surgical, because I just don't like the idea of weakening our food systems.
Yeah. Let's hope Secretary Rollins of USDA is listening, although I doubt it. Um, one of the things that was you talked about cutting the wrong way. The General Services Administration canceled leases for 6 Bureau of Indian Affairs offices and 4 Indian Health Services offices in states across the United States. And you were quoted as saying that, folks in rural communities will be royally screwed by these closures. Can you talk about sort of the impact of those closures and what you're sort of seeing and hearing?
Here's what people. Okay, I've spent a fair part of my life living in rural areas. I
Hmm.
still drive across many rural and remote areas. And yes, I don't have cell service when that happens. And I'm right now sitting in Oklahoma City with my sister, but as I go back to Fayetteville, Arkansas, there's 2 dead zones. And
Right.
I know where
Right.
they are, and I try to
Sure.
avoid them. When when you look up, and USDA is in every single county, then if I am one of those farmers who have really bad cell service, no matter
Hmm.
how much I pay for it,
Right.
because lines can't get to me,
Right.
or the only option is something that I literally cannot afford.
Right. Right.
So then I am going to have to get in my truck, and I'm going to have to go 3 counties over. Or
Yep.
if it really is decimated, I'm going to have to go into the capital
Yep.
to do business. And
Yeah.
I can't be gone that long. If you're a dairy
Right.
farmer,
Can't be gone at all.
you don't get a vacation.
Right.
And you certainly don't get a vacation to go all the way 3 counties over to fill out a
Sure.
piece of paperwork. I
Yeah.
mean, this assumption that the whole world lives in a high-speed internet access way is
Right.
ludicrous.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
don't do that yet. Number one. Number two, and I used to say this to people all the time, and they would scratch their heads and go, oh, she cannot be telling the truth. I know places, not just in Indian country, I know places that do not have sewer lines,
Right. Right. Right.
that the water doesn't go all the way out, and that electricity doesn't go to every single home. And
Right.
no, that's not just in Indian country, that is
Right.
other places in rural
Right.
America.
Yep.
So when you take out regional offices or localized offices of Bureau of Indian Affairs, or and you do the same over at USDA, where you have these county service areas and
Right.
places like that, then you literally are yanking the rug out from under people.
Right.
Not everybody lives in a city, nor should everybody. And our food production happens, for the most part, 99.99% of it happens away from an urban center. And so let's just be real about
Right.
what people's needs are. And that's my fear, is that if you're going to actually close offices and impact services that people actually need
Right.
to be able to keep things going, either within their family or within their business, then you're undercutting your whole purpose for being efficient
Right.
and effective. You're
Right.
basically taking, it's like a Jenga, you know, it's
Yeah.
like, which I don't play very well. It's like taking one of those bricks
Yeah.
out and expecting the house to still be standing.
Right. Right.
I don't think we play around with that.
No, we shouldn't be playing Jenga with our agriculture systems
No,
or our
and
people systems.
and that's why I said rural people will be royally screwed, because we live in a space, and I'm guilty of it too, Dani. I live primarily and come in and
Right.
out of
Yeah.
hubs,
Yep.
airport
Yep.
hubs,
Yep.
and I get antsy if I don't have
Yeah.
full all bars.
Same. Same.
But farmers and people who live on the land and live in rural areas live in that space all the time,
Right. Right.
and they should not be left behind.
No,
They
and they
need
really have. And it's not
water,
just
sewer,
right.
electric, all of it.
Broadband, everything. They've been left behind in so many ways, and it's terrible that, and you're right, that this is not efficient at all.
No.
Janie, as we sort of sum up, I know you're on the road and need to get back to work. What are the things that you think will help farmers and other producers really build resilience over these next 3 years? Because we're going to see more cuts. We're going to see more, lack of attention to rural areas, lack of attention to native farmers and other producers. What can those folks do in the meantime, to sort of get through this?
Well, some of this stuff is going to be really simple to say and hard to do.
Sure.
Um, if you're a producer, you need to be thinking about what your market truly is. You need to
Right.
be revisiting your business plan. You need to be sitting down with your banker, whoever that is. And if you
Hmm.
aren't satisfied with the one you got, then go find another one and do your best. Just shake the trees because it's going to be really important to hang close with whoever is providing you capital, if you are a
Right.
capital dependent entity like a farm or a ranch. So that's important. But I will tell you, the responsibility for this should not rest on just the producer's shoulders.
Right.
The
Right.
people who buy food, and I don't care whether you're a family or whether you're a school or whether you're a tribal government or whether you're a hospital, whoever it is, you need to be mindful of
Yeah.
where you're buying your food from. You need to,
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't ever buy X again. I'm just saying, of all of the money that you spend, can you spend a piece of it directing to local and regional producers who are going to need your help to actually
Right.
stay in the game
Yeah.
for another 10 years? And
Right. Right.
to me, anytime the country is in this sort of you know, challenging modes, financial modes, or, international challenges, anytime we're
Sure.
all in that kind of realm together, I think it behooves all of us to figure out where we sit, what role we have, and what we can impact. Like, for
Right.
instance, I just came from um, a couple of fairly good sized tribal meetings, and I challenged the tribal governments. Um, Figure out what, if you last done it 10 years ago, it's time for a redo. But
Sure. Sure.
figure out how much money you're spending on food, and
Right.
figure out exactly who the producers are that surround you, not just maybe your own tribe's producers, but who else is out there.
Right. Right.
And figure out how, and I'm not saying just totally fruit basket turnover your food budget, but figure out what they can provide you, what meaningful relationships and contracts you could have with them, so
Right.
that they have some security and can breathe, right? They can take that contract to their banker and say, look, I just had X tribal government. They've obligated themselves to
Right.
buy from me for 5 years, yada,
Right.
yada, yada. They're going to buy the food anyway. They've decided to buy it from me. There's all sorts of ways that the individual food person who does the food can actually, assess their risks, kind of
Right.
with eyes wide open, think about what they see as the challenges for themselves moving forward.
Right.
Maybe that's an encroaching urban area, or
Right.
maybe they can tell they're going to lose X market and they got it planned now. Or maybe they got a kid going away to college and they've got a whole nother set of
Right.
expenses facing them. They've got a responsibility looking that way and looking at their own real situation. But what can the market do? What can the people who buy and eat food do back towards them? Have
Right.
to be in
Right.
partnership here, because that's where, when we do that, then everybody can breathe a sigh of relief,
Right. Right.
right? And those gains can be made, and sometimes the
Yeah.
gains in places of upheaval is to not lose. That's
Right.
the gain,
Right.
is to literally, we're going to be stable for a while.
Right.
That's just really important. The other thing I've been telling people a lot is we are in an intergenerational shift.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not actually actively reaching out to young people to become your next producers in your locality, your region, your state, your tribe, then what are you doing?
Right. Right.
Because they are so much smarter than I am.
I wouldn't say that.
No, they are. And they have so many more skills and so much more at their fingertips than I ever
Sure.
did. I mean, Danny, I didn't have a computer. There was no such
Right.
thing as a cell phone when I became
Right.
a lawyer,
Right. Right.
which makes me feel really old. But
No, not at all.
why are we not actually making space for them
Yeah.
and putting them at the helm and at the hub of decision making? We need to. They shouldn't have to wait until they're 60.
Right. Right. They should be part of that decision-making process right now. Yeah.
Totally. And
Totally.
that includes, we better darn sure be protecting the land base.
Yeah.
We have got to protect the land base and quit thinking that there's just always going to be land out here.
Right. Right.
Nope. We're going to look up and it's going to be owned by who knows who.
Suburbs and yeah, and companies. Yeah. Yeah.
That's dangerous. And we need to be careful about that, because if we look up and our land base is unimaginably out of touch for us, or we don't even know who owns it, and Lord knows who they are, then we've got a bigger problem. It's called
Yeah.
a national security problem.
Right. Thank you
And
for reminding everyone that, food security in this country is a national security problem because if we can't feed ourselves, we're in big trouble.
yes, and Native people understand that.
Yep. Yep, they
We
certainly do.
lived through serious historical removals and restrictions on our ability to feed ourselves, and yet we persist
Yep,
because we are a resilient people and we are not going to leave this land. And that is a message, I think, of strength that a lot of people can hear, right?
right, right,
But regardless of whether you're native or not, we all need to pull together, and we've got to figure out what we're doing for the next 100 years on this food situation, because it's just too terribly important. I'm honored to be able to work in a space of the capital piece, because it brings my career full circle. I started
sure,
out working on capital issues and credit issues back in the 80s. It's still a problem today, but I'm never going to give up. And we can't give up.
right.
It's too important.
It's too important. Janie, what a pleasure and an honor to talk to you. I always learn so much. You're an inspiration. For folks who want to find out more information about Native Agriculture Financial Services, they can go to nativeagfinance.org. Janie, thank you so much. And I know you're keeping up the good fight.
I'm going to keep on keeping on.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so much,
much.
Danny. Appreciate it.